All right, here we go again. Corrupt cops who've crossed the line. Welcome back, everyone. Please like the videos, subscribe to the channel if you have not already, and share it on your social media. All right, now that that's out of the way, let's see what type of messes corrupt cops got him into with this episode. First up, we have an ex-Baltimore cop, 17 years on the job, recently got fired, and his name is Robert Vicosa. He went on a 4-day crime spree that ended up, he committed multiple robberies and multiple carjackings, and it ended up in a murder-suicide. Now, this was all done, obviously, while he's not a cop anymore because he got fired. So, but it still, basically has to do with the theme of the channel here, corrupt cops. So cops who cross the line, corrupt cops, all the same. But he did not do this in any of the performance of his duty. He got fired for totally separate things, mostly like sexual harassment, things like that. Anyway, so he was recently fired, I believe it was August, and he's also divorced. He invited his ex-wife over for some birthday cake with their 7- and 6-year-old daughters that they had together. She came over to his house, had some birthday cake. Everything seemed normal. He had his new relationship there also. And now this is where, once they started interviewing and investigating things, how things differ a little. Supposedly the new relationship went home. The ex-wife was still there with the kids. Kids must have went to bed, and he put a gun to his ex-wife's head, brought her down into the basement, tied her up, force-fed her some crushed oxys, made her smoke weed, and then raped her multiple times over the next day or two. She at some point got him, after all this, got him to let her go, and she went home, reported him, and then cops went there, and he was already gone. Now he took the 7- and 6-year-old kids they had together, and he's on the run. They went and interviewed his current relationship, who said she had left after they had cake and the ex-wife was still there. I believe the ex-wife says differently, that the new relationship was still there. That's, she said type of thing. So now cops are on a manhunt for them because he's on the run with 2 kids, and he's pointed a gun at his ex-wife and raped her multiple times, force-fed her drugs, apparently. At some point after they investigate the new relationship, who said she was gone, she has nothing to do with this, they didn't have nothing to hold her on, she went back to her own place, and apparently he went and picked up his new relationship and was now on the run with his new relationship and the 2 kids. Again, carjacked multiple people, so they're in this at least the second carjacking at this point. Cops come across the cars reporting stolen because it was a carjacking. Cops come across them. There's a brief chase. The car crashes into a tree. The new relationship, who is, by the way, I don't know if I said it, the ex-cop we're talking about, who was 17 years on the job, his name was Robert Vicosa. His new relationship was a sergeant with, I believe it was 14 years on the job. Yeah, she's a 14-year vet. Her name was Tia Bynum. So now she's supposedly driving the stolen car, and Robert's in the back with his 6- and 7-year-old daughters. Brief chase by the the real cops on duty who were chasing them. Very brief chase, and the car crashes into a tree. They approach the car with caution, guns drawn most likely, since he had threatened with a gun, and Tia Bynum, the sergeant, is also a cop, and she has a gun as well. So they approach the car, and everyone in the car is dead by gunshot wounds. So they, over the many reports I have read, it doesn't say who shot who, but it sounds like he shot his new relationship, Tia Bynum, in the head. It was a head wound, and then shot his kids and shot himself. So that's how it ended up, murder-suicide. Sad situation, how everything went downhill, and he took his kids' lives. So that's something his ex-wife is going to have to deal with for the rest of her life. Unbelievable situation, how someone's life could turn on a dime like that. All right, so our next story is about a Newark, New Jersey cop. His name was Luis Santiago. He's only 25 years old, a couple of years on the job. This is also has nothing to do with his duties as a cop. He was off duty when this happened, driving home at 3 a.m. with a passenger in the car. And apparently he veers off the road for some reason, very slightly. Doesn't say if he was sleepy or if he was drunk. He wasn't charged with DUI, so I'm assuming he wasn't drunk. He hit a pedestrian on the side of the road. It was a nurse who was walking home, 29 years old. Yeah, 29-year-old nurse walking home at 3 a.m. Doesn't really get into where she was. It wasn't a she, was a male nurse. Doesn't say where he was going or coming from. Most likely going home at 3 a.m. So Santiago stops, picks up the nurse who is dead with the passenger in his car, and puts the nurse in the backseat of his car, leaves the scene. Just drives home. Let's load up the dead body in the back of the car. And this is a cop. It was an accident. Apparently he wasn't drunk because there's no DUI charges at the end of all this. So I guess he panicked. It's an accident, bro. Loads up the body in the back of the car, goes home. Now has a discussion with the passenger and his mother, involves his mother on what to do with the body. Meanwhile, his father, who is a lieutenant in the police department, calls 911 to report the accident. Cops show up, on-duty cops show up, and right there in the back seat is the body of the dead male nurse. So Santiago gets arrested, charged with vehicular homicide, desecrating a body, conspiracy. The mother and passenger in his car also charged with conspiracy, and I believe the passenger was also hit with desecrating the body for helping move the body. The mother was just charged with the conspiracy. I think eventually the charges against the mother is going to be dropped. I mean, she could say she was discussing him calling 911. I mean, unless somebody testifies against her, the passenger or Santiago himself. So we'll see what happens with that. I doubt there'll be any follow-up. It's not a big enough case, not a big enough story. But she was charged, passenger was charged, and Santiago was charged. Don't know what the hell they were thinking, moving a body. It was an accident. See what happens. Maybe they did some blood work on him, and then maybe there were drugs in his system. Well, he wasn't hit with DUI. I'm sure they gave him a breathalyzer. Christmas is coming up, man. Buy one of the mugs. Pick it up for yourself or somebody else. Pick up my book, Betrayal in Blue. So those are our two stories, what cops are getting themselves into nowadays. No heavy corruption like back in the 80s with myself and my partner. Okay, there was one Q&A. I'm going to read it exactly as it was written. Kenny, why did your wife's mother live at the precinct? You mentioned that in the documentary. Wasn't exactly that. What I said in the documentary is my wife's grandmother who lived within the confines of the 7-5, and I used to stop by there daily while I was working, check up on her, make sure she was okay. Constantly, man, she would have food out ready for me, chicken and rice. Very lovely woman, very religious. She had lost her husband years earlier. She moved around a lot. When back in the 50s and I don't know if it was the 60s, but back in the 50s for sure. In the 40s, she lived in the confines of the 7-5. My mother-in-law, when she was a kid, lived with them, and she went to Thomas Jefferson High School right on Pennsylvania Avenue. They also lived in Ronkonkoma out on Long Island. They lived in Puerto Rico for a number of years. But at the end, after her husband passed, she moved back to the confines of the 7-5 precinct up by Highland Park, right off Jamaica Avenue, because she still had family there. So she wanted to be close to family. Wasn't my mother-in-law, wasn't my wife's mother, it was my wife's grandmother. And like I mentioned in the documentary, on days where I worked, my wife would want to go in and visit her grandmother. It made it easy for her. She drove in, I drove her in when I went to work. She would visit her grandmother while I was working. And then at the end of the tour, I would pick her up and we'd go home. So that's the reason my wife's grandmother lived in the confines of the 7-5. All right. Hope you guys enjoyed the show, and hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving, and try to get another show out before Christmas. I mean, we've got 4 weeks before Christmas, so more than likely I will get one out. Thanks so much for stopping by.